Okay, I think that we can start. We have many colleagues coming, even if in Brussels is sunshine. You see, people prefer to listen to you than to go around with the sun.
Oh my God, I mean, okay.
It's not like in Barcelona and Cadarache, where the sun is always there. In Brussels, it's really
in Brussels, it's an happening, and so it requires. Okay, all right. So thank you for attending, notwithstanding the sun, and thank you for inviting me, Cristiano, for to give you an update on the ITER project. So let me introduce myself. My name is Pietro Barabaschi. I am the DG of the ITER organization. I am responsible overall for the ITER project. I was working for other projects until 2022. In the middle of the year, September, I was appointed as the Director General of ITER. And I will be very glad to tell you about this project that I know relatively well, also because I did work in this project also in the 90s and in the early 2000s. So I left it, it was about 2005, and I came back, yes, in 2022. So I will try to spend, not too much on the slides, assuming that there could be some questions, because, the topic is quite vast, and if I don't know how you will handle the questions, but I would propose to allocate some time to that. So let me get going. So the project, the ITER, is a project that was born out of the need of cooperation, and also to some extent also out of, I would say, the political wish of two leaders, which the idea came about during the Geneva summit in 1985 between Gorbachev and Reagan, to cooperate in the field of nuclear fusion. But it was quickly, joined by Euratom and the Japanese government. So the four founding members of ITER have been the United States, the Soviet Union, and Euratom, and the government of Japan. And the idea in the middle of the 80s then became a reality through the so-called ITER design activities, engineering design activities, that was signed and implemented in the early 90s. So it took quite some time to go from a concept to an idea. And it came about on the fact that at that point in time, there was cooperation amongst the members, say Russia, the US, Europe, Japan, on nuclear fusion, but there was also some level of competition. I think many of you may know the JET joint undertaking in the UK was a European project. Well, to some extent is still a European project now in the commissioning, and which was based in Oxford, where, by the way, I myself worked in the very early 90s, and other devices of the kind were present in the US, in Princeton, in Japan, and to a lesser extent, but also in Russia. But at that point in time, there was the realization that the transport of, say, the heat confinement in plasma was not as good as everybody hoped in the 80s, and that the plasma was not exactly behaving. And I will tell you a little bit more about that. But say, going back to the politics, there was the idea that nobody in the world was ready to invest enough money to build a big enough device that would achieve what we called ignition. So ignition is a point where fusion occurs, is to a degree where the plasma itself will remain heated. I will speak about this a little bit later. So there was a focus on cooperation. So it is really a project of cooperation at world scale. And the agreement was signed in 2006. And at that point in time, also on top of the four founding members, also South Korea and India and China joined the project. So it became really at world scale. It represents more than half of the world population. It represents more than 80% of the world GDP. So I would like to clarify from the onset something which is in fact relatively complicated. And this image is an image which I prepared with my colleagues in Fusion for Energy more than 10 years ago when I had to explain the governance of ITER to the European Parliament. And so it gives the context of ITER, the ITER organization, where does it fit in the overall governance and execution of the project itself. And I look at it from the European standpoint. I think most people here will be interested in that. So I am in charge of the ITER International Organization, which is, say, the owner and the licensee, because it's a nuclear facility also. So we are responsible for the overall integration. The organization is responsible to define technical specification. Not clear maybe here in this diagram, it's also responsible to have a lot of assembly contracts and some delivery contracts, and reports to the ITER Council. The ITER Council is where the 7 members attend, and there will be one at the end of June. And this is where the European Commission participates. So the European Commission is one of the 7 members. There are 4 council members from the European Commission, 4 from each one of the other 6. And there are some rules in which the ITER Council works as an international, say, of the governance of an international organization. We have then that the ITER organization is placing some specific contracts, and it's providing, and it's also engaging in relationship with the European Domestic Agency, which is Fusion for Energy, for 45% of the value of the project, as well as with other domestic agencies, which each one of which has about 9.5% of contribution, so the total being then 100%. So Europe has almost half of the contribution, and it's also responsible to provide to the ITER organization about half of its budget. And the budget now is quite big of the ITER organization because we are in the assembly phase. So we have very, very many assembly contracts and some delivery contracts also. So, but the bulk of the delivery contracts, so the hardware itself that built ITER, was provided, has been provided, and it's still being provided in kind from the domestic agency. That, in the specific case of Europe, is represented by Fusion for Energy, based in Barcelona. So now I will take an overall perspective of the project, not a European perspective, but of course, you know, I am quite aware of the European perspective. Now, Fusion for Energy is a joint undertaking, and it is also having a lot of staff of the European Union, so just like many other joint undertakings, and it has a governing board where all European member states participate, and the European Commission is, of course, in turn a member of the governing board. Now, the host state has a specific role because it provides bigger contributions on financing of Fusion for Energy than what otherwise would be through the European Commission, in lieu of the fact that France is the host, so it has a certain benefit. And similarly to what you see here happens in the other members. So, you know, they also have a relationship with their own DA, but each domestic agency is to some extent a little bit different than the others. And of course, our ambition is to make sure that the ITER project is implemented in as integrated way as possible to avoid duplication of efforts between the ITER organization and the various domestic agencies. So let me go back now a bit to the science, because you hear sometimes that fusion has, that we have the idea that we want to recreate the energy of the sun on Earth. Okay, sounds very, very nice. And to some extent it is true, but to some extent it is not. So I need to explain a little bit better. So first, the sun. You know, the sun is our main source of energy. No sun, no life, essentially. If you think about the way we capture the energy of the sun, it's through solar panels. We capture the energy of the sun, sometimes just capturing the energy of the wind, the waves, and hydroelectric even comes originally because the sun evaporates water, then it rains, then as it makes its way back to the sea, we captured the, say, the energy, the kinetic energy of the rivers. So everything comes from the sun. The exceptions being geothermal energy, which we also capture, and nuclear power, which sometimes, well, sometimes up to now, we capture through a process called fission. Fusion is different. It's the reaction really that brings together light nuclei, and from heavier one, it still affects the nucleus. And so it is extremely energy dense. A very small amount of matter will provide a tremendous amount of energy. And so it happens on the sun, where the main fusion reaction is the one of protons, and protons are the nuclei of hydrogen. So it's the simplest element, and they do fuse. They fuse when the temperature is extremely high. And high means several millions of degrees. In the sun, we have about 20 million degrees. And when I tell you, 20 million or a billion or a trillion, it doesn't matter, it's still tremendously hot, but it doesn't make a difference between 10 million and 100 million, I'll tell you, when we go and try to do it. And the best temperature to have fusion is about 100 million degrees. But in the sun, it's not necessary. About 15 million degrees are sufficient. And it is sufficient also because the density in the core of the sun is very high. Just what does it mean high? The density, the amount of matter in 1 cubic meter of sun core weighs about 150 tons. So for comparison, 1 cubic meter of water weighs 1 ton, and 1 cubic meter of iron weighs 7 tons on Earth. 1 cubic meter of, say, gold weighs about 20 tons. And pretty much that's it. There is nothing heavier than that. There are few elements on Earth that weigh a little bit more than 20 tons per cubic meter. And on the sun, hydrogen, which on Earth is very rare, very rarefact, weighs 150 tons. And it is so because of the gravitational force. So if I would show you the size of Earth on this image, you would see basically like a little dot, a little P there standing on the slide. So the huge size provides tremendous gravitational force, tremendous pressure. And under this condition, the fusion reactions occur relatively, rapidly. Now, the fact of the matter is that the power that is produced by this hydrogen fusion, it's actually modest. I'll tell you something that few people are aware of. In the center of the sun, the power density, so the amount of power per cubic meter, is about 200 watts per cubic meter. So for comparison, the power density which is produced in our body is about 1 kilowatt per cubic meter. So we produce about 100 watts. See, we are about 1/10 of a cubic meter. I mean, of course, so we are not all the same, but I mean, in general terms. So the power density in the core of the sun is quite modest. And the reason why the sun gets so hot and it's generating so much power is essentially because there is a lot of matter. It takes a lot of time for energy to escape its core. It has a tremendous mass, tremendous energy confinement time. So if we would just reproduce the reaction that goes on the sun on Earth, it would be hardly useful, because when you have a reactor that produces a power density which is comparable to the power density in a pile of manure, okay, what do you do with that? You don't really produce electricity with that. So we have two conditions, which are a condition which is very difficult, if not outright impossible to achieve. And besides, even if we would do that, it would be practically useless. So not a good sign. But we have something else that we can use, which is there are two elements which are called deuterium and tritium. And these two elements are called isotope of hydrogen because they are two nuclei which chemically, once they have an electron around, they would behave exactly like hydrogen. But from a nuclear standpoint, they are different. The hydrogen nucleus, it is just one proton. And the deuterium nucleus is 1 proton and 1 neutron, and tritium is 1 proton and 2 neutrons. So now I will not explain what does it mean in practice, but they are a little bit different. From a nuclear standpoint, they are a different element in essence. Although from a chemical standpoint, we call them the same species of hydrogen because chemically they behave the same way. But from a nuclear standpoint, it's completely different. The two elements fuse very, very, say, actively. They fuse in a way which is uncomparable with protons. So we don't really need to have a density of 150 tons per cubic meter. It is enough to have a milligram per cubic meter, 1 milligram. So a small amount of gas. And once we bring them to 100 million degrees, then ignition will occur, and the power that will be produced is in the order of 1 megawatt, 1 million watt per cubic meter. So now we are talking about something completely different and something that can seriously produce energy. So what do we need to do now? We need to take, say, if we want to produce about a gigawatt, we need to take about 1,000 cubic meter, 1 megawatt per cubic meter, and we need to take about 1 gram. 1 gram of gas will produce 1 gigawatt of power, and we'll be able to do that for minutes even. So imagine how much energy can be produced. 1 gram would be able to produce, to generate the energy that a human being needs in his entire lifetime. So it's really, really, very promising, but also very, very difficult. So that's why the ITER design was conceived. It is a tokamak. Now I will not have neither the time nor the possibility to go in details on how does it work in practice, why it is like that in detail. But you have to take my word. The idea behind the tokamak is to create a donut, a torus, where we will shape a plasma. This plasma will have to be contained by magnetic fields. And why so? Because you take 1 gram of gas. 1 gram of gas is pretty much the gas that you have in a bike. So take another torus, which is a bicycle tire. It's about 1 gram. And we put it in 1 million times the volume, because the bicycle tire more or less 1 liter, let's say, a race bike take, which, by the way, has a pressure of about 8 bar. A race bike does have that pressure. We put it in 1 million times volume. We have to increase the temperature by 1 million times, and we get, in fact, about the same pressure, about 8 bar, 10 bar in the tokamak. But we cannot just contain this pressure by a container like we do in a bike or in a Coca-Cola can or whatnot, because the gas is raised to a plasma and raised to 100 million degrees, and it's just 1 gram. So if you put it in a container, it would immediately cool off. So we have to basically contain the energy, contain the matter there through magnetic fields. And this works because magnetic field leads particles who are charged to move in a way which is completely different from the one that they do in just without magnetic field in itself. They follow some particular field lines, and when we shape it into a torus and we put some current, we find that there is a way to confine energy so that we can really get the plasma to this temperature. The magnetic fields are very powerful, and so they need to be generated typically by superconducting magnets that allow to sustain this magnetic field for a long time without dissipating the energy and the power that otherwise would be dissipated in the case of, say, copper magnet. But the first tokamaks were made of copper, not superconductors. But when we move to ITER, it would become essentially impossible to have magnets made of copper, and so it was decided to make them superconducting. But ITER is not just that; it is a lot of, say, systems that go along with the tokamak itself, and which I can describe to some extent later. But the fundamental thing is the plasma, the heating systems, and the magnetic field that generate the reaction itself. So now important will be that ITER will reach something called ignition or close to ignition. What does it mean, this? I mean, you know what happens to a piece of wood. If you take a piece of wood, it's not ignited per se. If you bring it to a sufficiently high temperature, if you throw a dry piece of wood inside a pizza oven, which is already hot, it will ignite. And what happens in the piece of wood is that there are some flammable components. Some flammable means some chemicals that oxidize, and by oxidation produce power. And through this oxidation, the burning, as we call it, say oxidation is the chemical reaction, the so-called burning, the heat produced is sufficient to keep the temperature which is necessary to have this chemical reaction going. So this is what happens when you have ignition. But wood doesn't ignite just because it exists. It ignites because the conditions are there for it to ignite. And the same is true for the plasma, thermonuclear plasma. It needs to ignite at very high temperature. So that is going to be the main objective of ITER. It is the thermonuclear ignition. But it's not just that, because when ITER was designed, it was not just to get ignition for a second. We wanted to have ignition and for a long time, because we know that we can get ignition. No, it happened already. For example, in the NIF in Livermore, there was ignition of a small specimen of deuterium and tritium ice for, say, a very, very short time, a very small fraction of a second. The idea here is that when you want to produce power, you have to reach stationary condition. So stationary for an experiment doesn't mean days or months. It means fractions of an hour. And you can imagine, if I can make an analogy of an engine. If you want to make sure that it works, okay, maybe a few seconds are enough. But one may say, well, let's try to reach operating temperature. Let's make sure we can produce power and reach operating temperature. And say the time constant is a bit dead. But there are many other things that ITER will do. We'll look at the interaction of the plasma with the wall. It will look at so-called tritium breeding to a certain extent, because you see, tritium is an element that you cannot find in nature. We have to manufacture it, and we manufacture it by having a nuclear reaction between neutrons and lithium. We can buy some tritium from heavy water reactors. It is say, a byproduct of some fission reactors, so-called heavy water reactors. So we can buy some, but eventually in fusion will have to be bred. So all of this will also be done to a certain extent in ITER. Now ITER is an experiment, and I want to put the things straight because some people may get the wrong idea. For me, it's important to make sure that expectations, everything looks wonderful. We have an energy source which can produce tremendous amount of power, but there are some things that we need to resolve beside ITER, aside ITER, to make this as a real energy source. There was a guy that in the UK that in the 80s said, his name was Walter Marshall. He said fusion is an energy source which has an infinite possibilities and zero chance of success. So it's something which looks huge, beautiful, but will not work. And his point was that it's too complicated. And okay, he had a very negative approach to this. I think it's not quite true that there's zero chance of success, but we have to be conscious, and we cannot, I am keen also not to give a false expectation to policymakers, because energy is important for society. We, of course, should try, and if we don't try, we'll never succeed. But we have to be conscious of the difficulties. And the first difficulty is cost. I should be clear. What we know is that fusion now is too expensive. We are building in ITER, we gain a lot of experience in that. We try now, and as I will show you, to move on faster and try to make it in a way which is going to be overall cheaper. But still, we have to face the problem of complexity and try to find ways to deliver this reaction through simpler components. So we have also the problem of heat flux management. The heat flux produced by a fusion reaction is not constant across the surface. You know, normally when you have like a power source, like a flame, like a coal power station, you can embed in the flame the heat exchanger. You can put a flame completely immersed in heat exchangers, which then capture the heat in the form of water and run steam turbines and whatnot. Can't do that in fusion. You cannot put a heat exchanger in the middle of something that it's supposed to operate at 100 million degrees. So there is no element that would survive, and immediately the plasma would cool off. So we have to capture the energy at the edge, and this comes out to be very concentrated. So not simple, and we will have to do a lot of experiment in ITER to resolve this problem, but I trust other experiments will have to deal with that. We have tritium breeding at scale, which is still to be demonstrated, and we have the questions of reliability and efficiency that will have to be, to some extent, they will be addressed in ITER, but I think that ITER will identify some problems and we will have to find solutions. So, I mean, all what I want to say here is to say it's not something that in case you have the hope that we will see all of this deployed in a matter of few years, I am rather skeptical about that. But at the same time, we have to move on, and we have to move on and implement the project in a timely fashion. So now I switch to the less, say, scientific part and more on the project status part. Where do we stand now? This is a view of the work site. We have about 5,000 people that come in every day here in the work site. And of these 5,000 people, we have about 1,000 who are staff of the ITER organization, the international organization. Here in Cadarache, we have about 100 staff from the European Domestic Agency, and we have another 200 staff of project associates, plus the bulk is contractors, are people that come and work of assembly contractors, companies, industries that come and work on the work site where there are a lot of assembly activities. And assembly, it's not just putting things together with nuts and bolts. There is a lot of say, welding and complicated assembly activities. And in terms of delivery and the parts that built the tokamak, what you see here is an image of one of the toroidal field coils, so-called. We have 18 of them. Half have been built in Europe under the responsibility of Fusion for Energy. Another half have been built in Japan under the responsibility of the Japanese Domestic Agency. The conductor was built by pretty much everybody. And we have 18 coils plus one spare, and all the coils are on site, and they have been delivered already since some time, and they are now in the assembly phase. And so you see there one of them standing up. This magnet overall will have an energy, combined energy of about 40 gigajoule. And just for comparison, the energy of the Large Hadron Collider is about 10 gigajoule. So if some of you may know what the Large Hadron Collider is in CERN, the energy of ITER will be about 4 times as big. So by far, it will be the most energetic magnet ever built by humanity. So it is quite a thing. And you can see the size. If you look carefully on the lower right of the coil, you see some people. And these are not, they are not dwarfs. They are actually normally sized people. So it's quite a thing to see, and to see the size that we had to deploy this technology with. We have a central solenoid as another magnet also delivered. This was built in the United States. It's a very, very heavy magnet, also completely superconducting. We have a beautiful magnet that was built, a magnet system that was built largely by Fusion for Energy on site, by the way, because they could not be transported, some of these magnets in particular. This one could not be transported. So there was a group of an industrial consortium that was working together with Fusion for Energy to manufacture this coil and these coils on site. And all the PF coil systems have been delivered. We have the vacuum vessel that was originally considered a relatively simple piece of metallic carpentry. It turned out to be much more complicated than that. It's built in 9 sectors, 5 of which have been built in Europe and 4 in Korea. The 4 Korean sectors have already been delivered since some time. 4 European sectors are already here, so we have 8 in total. And we will have 1 more, the last sector from Europe, that will be delivered later this year. Very, very complex component, finally to be built. And what we do is that we take generally 1 vacuum vessel sector, 9 in total, and we merge it, we pre-assemble it with 2 TF coils. So we have 18 TF coils in total with the thermal shield, which needs to be between the 2 of them. It's a relatively complex pre-assembly activity. And once this pre-assembly activity is completed, we take the sector and we move it into the so-called tokamak pit, which is where the reactor will be sited. So the pre-assembly, it's done in the assembly hall. This is where you see this image taken, where we have 2 assembly frames, 2 areas where we do the pre-assembly. And what you see here is actually a lifting. So this is the process by which we take one of these vacuum vessel sectors and we move it into the pit. It's quite a thing to see it because the whole sector weighs about 1,400 tons. What you see here in a few seconds, it takes about a day. And when the sector is put in the pit, you see here the image of the 3rd sector being lowered in the pit. Then we can move back in the assembly frame and we can start the assembly of the next or the next +1 sector. So this was the third sector installed. And what this photo shows 4 sectors, because the 4th sector was installed in January, a 5th sector was supposed to be installed in May. In fact, it was installed yesterday. So this image was taken early morning, where you see now 5 full sectors in the pit. And we will have a 6th one in July. We are moving very, very fast now. We have about 2 sectors every 6 months. So by the end of the year, the torus will be almost completed, and early next year we will put the last sectors in, after which point in time we will start the real assembly of the torus through welding of the vacuum vessel. So this starts to be more work more done in a more cramped position. So we have other systems, and I will mention a few. We have magnet power conversion. Let's say you have a hi-fi at home that drives music through your loudspeakers. It's about 100 watts. This is about 100 megawatts, so 1,000,000 times bigger, more powerful, and it will drive current, variable current in the magnet to shape the plasma, to form the plasma and the likes. We have a very large cryogenic system, because a cryogenic system is, say, again, analogy with the home is a big refrigerator. That's basically it. It will have to liquefy helium. Helium normally is a gas, but at very low temperature, it's liquid, and it can be driven and for cooling the magnet. So that is the system. It's called cryoplant, and this was built essentially by Fusion for Energy, and some contracts also placed by the ITER organization. This was a very big, successful project that was already, concluded some time ago. And the cryoplant was, used, it's already used now, because recently we decided to build a test facility to test some of the magnets. And so we actually had, for the first time, superconductivity here on site, because last week one of the magnets, a magnet built in Japan, reached superconducting state, and just today, as we speak, we are putting currents in it in a test facility that hopefully will be useful also in the private sector. We have a tremendous amount of diagnostics that will and are being built and will be installed in ITER. We have about 10 times more signal than in JET, about 100 times more data per second, very, very fast, data logging. So a huge amount of volume of data, and that's the objective of ITER. But what are the objectives of the organization today? One is very fast project execution. This is our objective. We are paid by public money, and we have to try to give back to the public a fast execution. We have the objective at this point in time to share the know-how to the members and their private sector. It's the project will provide data only when it will work. So of course we want to do this as quickly as possible. But already now we have a lot of know-how, and there is a thriving private sector in the world, and our ambition is to try to help them achieve their objectives just as fast. So we have this know-how, and also a lot of know-how not, by the way, because know-how is published, but know-how not. So what to avoid, it's often not published. We want to prepare for a faster research so that we can get to thermonuclear fusion once the machine will be completed as quickly as possible. And we also want to provide feedback and develop, in second instance, some cost-effective solutions in general for fusion. So we will have, now we will not spend time on this, we will have a lot of tools that we use also in terms of artificial intelligence, because some people ask me, what do you do with artificial intelligence? Of course, we don't want artificial intelligence to help us to get faster to the wrong results, but there is some use in the organization where we can deploy artificial intelligence to try to get more value for money on a faster time scale. So the result is that ITER, you may have heard, was relatively struggling as a project. I mean, there were issues of performance. And so we had of course, the 7 members, not just Euratom, but all the other 6 as well, they were not so happy because they saw that the schedule performance was poor. So what is a schedule performance? We call it something schedule performance index. If you want to drive from Paris to Brussels with a bicycle, you make a schedule. You say, okay, the first hour I will reach this point, second hour I reach this point, and so on and so forth. And I will reach my target in that day. And in a project, you have to have this, you have to have a plan. And the plan is so much important because you have not just one activity, but you have thousands of activities that feed into each other. So very important is to measure the project progress and adjust the activities as you go. And typically, ITER was running at a project execution rate of about 60%. So it means that every plan that was made, and 3 plans were successively made, every time it was always running at about 60% speed, roughly. So that is not good for a project, particularly one which is important to conclude relatively quickly. So we had to analyze the reason for this performance weaknesses and restructure the organization and do other measures to achieve higher performance. We had issues with the regulator. So we report to the council when it comes to execution data, financial data, and all the matters that our governments, other member states care. But we also have to respond to the French regulator, who wants to assure that the project will be safe, because it's still going to be a nuclear installation. And the regulator was, through several audits, not happy with the way the project was going, was not happy with our transparency, and we had to recover trust. So when the regulator don't trust you, you are in trouble. It's like when the European Court of Auditors don't trust you, you have some work to do to improve transparency and make sure that, of course, the trust is never total, but a good relationship of trust is facilitating project execution. We had to restructure many assembly contracts that were having poor performance, repair components. We have to develop a new baseline and try to achieve a higher execution rate. So the execution rate has been considerably better in 24, 25, and the early part of 26. We had the schedule performance index integrated, so the average one. And I think it goes up and down, but the important is the average of 105%, which means that we are going a little bit faster, actually, than what we thought we could achieve. So we are, in fact, when I show you the 5th sector being installed in the pit, this was supposed to go in the pit in October. So we managed to anticipate. And I think this is important for us because it creates more support from all our stakeholders that have been very patient with us for a number of years with our relatively, let's say, slow performance. And now we can try to deliver this project on a faster time scale. So we have a measure called earned value. You know, when you have a project, it's not just budget execution, but is the right part of the budget being executed with the right cost performance. And you see here so-called earned value. Earned value is the capital growth of the hardware we build together. And you see that there has been a very important improvement in the annual earned value when it came to 24 and 25. And also 26 will be a pretty good year. We had to slow down even a little bit because we were going a little bit too fast. So we had to slow down a bit because we are running out of money otherwise. But we have a schedule performance index that is improving, and I think it will stabilize if things go ahead like this at about 105, 106%. We will have a number of milestones ahead of us, so it's not just ignition, but it's the completion of the central solenoid, is the cryostat closure, the vacuum, and the deuterium operation and tritium operation. These are the nominal dates that have been shared with the members. But as I said, we are working to try to anticipate these dates. So even today, I was trying to see that we should probably achieve cryostat closure 1 year ahead of schedule. And I think this would be great if we can really reach that objective. So I will stop here. I have another more comprehensive video of the work site that I hope you can see. I don't know. I'm not so sure that the signal is good enough to see, but some image will come where you can see the different areas of the work site. Of course, it's always a nice place to visit in person because it's difficult to realize, through a video or images, the magnitude of the facility. But, having taken 50 minutes of your time, I will stop here and see if any one of you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pietro, for this very challenging, even emotional presentation. I already got so many positive feedback of people. They are really happy about what has been explained. Actually, the origin of this conference has been that sending around our own communication on fusion for energy, everyone was asking me what fusion for energy is supposed to do and what ITER is exactly. And I think today we provide a clear information about what is going on. For the colleagues that have already asked, this conference will be recorded and made available on our YouTube channel, so everyone could have access. And I got already some question on the chat, and please put your question in the chat so Pietro would eventually answer. We have to stop at 2:30 because Pietro has another commitment. The first question that I got is there any contradiction between the renewed optimism on fusion and the pessimism on ITER? So fusion seems to be really a la mode. Every day we see in the newspaper that someone has managed to do something, even a really small scale, while ITER has a planning on tens and tens of years, and not for providing energy, but only in order to show that it would be possible to do it. So the perception seems to be that ITER is too big, too slow. Is a right perception or not?
Well, good question. Thank you for asking this question. So first, for me, it is important that I provide you and I provide to our stakeholder, the European Commission, and everybody, what is, I believe, an accurate image. An accurate image means an image which doesn't have too much decoration, and that creates the right level of expectation. Because energy, in particular, is something which is not a nice to have. We need energy, and energy provides well-being, welfare, and so I don't want, in any case, to create an image which is too rosy, and then people will say, "Oh, okay, here we have the solution of all problems." At the same time, I want to make sure that we stick to our word. So we provide a schedule, and this schedule should be the one that we have confidence that we will meet. And when I say that we got 105%, it means we will meet. Now, things can go south sometimes, so, maybe next, in a week, we will have a technical problem. We will have to slow down. So in general, I want to keep the schedule. Now, I am aware that there are some institutions, some people that have a much more optimistic view, or it's their view. And I call it optimistic because I think it is overly optimistic. And time will tell. At the same time, while you can detect that I am somewhat, let's put it, skeptical, that some will achieve, a commercially viable fusion energy source in a matter, let's say, of a few years, as some claim. We will do our best to help them. I can be skeptical, but help nevertheless. If they will achieve their objective, it will be wonderful. It will be for everybody happiness. If tomorrow somebody will find a way to implement this technology quickly with a cost-effective role, and ITER becomes redundant, it's great. It's why I should not be surely unhappy of that. So, but I have some doubts, and what I have, on the other hand, no doubts, is that ITER has been so far too expensive and too slow, and this we have to look why it was too slow and expensive. Because if ITER is sort of kind of a prototype and it takes so long with so much money, then by definition this will not be a cost-effective energy source. So we have to find a way to do things on a more effective time scale. Now, of course, ITER is a project which is an international organization. It has a complex governance. It has many elements that lead it to be slower. It is, say, an organization which is subject to follow public procurement rules. Now, we have a lot of more freedom than maybe, I don't know, other public procurement agency have, because we have explained that we need to have a little bit more freedom in order to go faster, in order to save money, but we still have to follow largely procurement rules. So we have some intrinsic reasons to be a little bit slower than what private sector could be. But I think that now we are trying to turn a bit. We are trying to show that even in public procurement, even in complex international organization, we can execute project at a competitive, say, time frame. But the question remains, these contradictions that I see sometimes. Why should we build ITER? It's so big. Now, what I can tell you about the big is that I really think that fusion at the end will need to be big. It is a problem of power flux. The magnetic fields can help us to reduce the size. But when you deal in engineering problems, size is not the only source of cost. And I can give you some example in technology. If you take an engine, just a simple, internal combustion engine, and you take and you want to find which is the cheapest, let's say 500 horsepower engine, you will find that the cheapest is probably the largest. It is the engine of a truck, which is very heavy, very large, and it weighs about 10 times more than what is, in fact, the most expensive 5-hour engine, which is the one that you find maybe in a supercar, a Ferrari or the like. So You know, when you increase power flux, when you reduce size for the sake of it, you don't always get the cheapest solution. ITER is big, has been expensive. And I think for personally, having worked in this technology a long time, I am skeptical that it will finally work at small scale. But skeptical as I haven't lost the hope. Somebody may find a very good idea to achieve that objective. So it's a very long answer to a very, very important question. And I hope that I could, yes, help, say, quell some of the questions that are in your mind.
I think, Pietro, that I will be obliged to ask to be available for dealing with the question that has been raised after the meeting, because there are that many that we are not able, and that is also the proof of the interest that you are now evoking with your intervention. Coming to the other possible, more positive way too. Stefano is asking, what are the difference between the ITER and Commonwealth fusion system tokamaks that seems to be more optimistic in its ability to become operational in shorter term?
Okay, so there are many initiatives around the world, you know, who seek private sector funding. One of them is indeed the one which is in the United States. It was a startup that by now is no longer a startup. It's a company. They started, I think, about 10 years ago, roughly, and they had a plan to utilize the tokamak. And they want to utilize high temperature superconductors as a way to increase the magnetic field and therefore to reduce the size of the tokamak. So I think that, as I said before, I don't quite believe that increasing the magnetic field will solve all problems, but this is what they claim. And but fundamentally, it's the same concept. It is not dissimilar. There have been ideas of ignition machines in compact size already in the 80s and the 90s. And I mentioned the fact that it's necessary to reach stationary conditions. The machine that they are building right now, it's a machine that will operate only a few seconds. And I personally don't believe that it's likely that it will reach ignition, by the way. So they are, say, in the club of the group of optimists, and I wish them luck. But essentially, it is the same type of concept. And if I may, there are also other concepts around the world that use different confinement systems. It's not that the tokamak is the only idea, you know. It is the one which has been pursued the most because it has resulted to have the best confinement properties. But personally, I'm not even sure it's the best, you know. Of course, the best is the enemy of the good. We have to find something which works first. And I am of the opinion that on the long run, we may find other solutions which are cheaper and simpler than the tokamak, which is a relatively complex system.
Okay, there is another question that Isa is mentioning. It was mentioned that tritium for fusion reaction could be produced from lithium. The electronic sector is also quite hungry for lithium to other purpose. Is there perhaps a scarcity of tritium, deuterium sources in the future?
Yes, I think it's a fair point. I put it in the list of the difficult technical topics. I don't believe that there is such a problem with lithium availability by principle, you know. We don't need so much lithium to produce tritium. You will hear that. But you know, so we don't, okay, I tell you, you know, you need 1 gram of lithium to produce enough tritium to give you enough energy for your entire lifetime. You see, it is really, as a matter of principle, not a problem of availability. But in the technology deployment, it's not that simple because you cannot just take a gram of tritium, of lithium and make a gram of tritium just like that. It is, first you have to start with much more lithium, and only a part of it will transform in tritium. And the way we build this so-called tritium breeder it's very complicated. I find it that is an area of R&D which ITER will only be able to support, but when it's one of the areas where when I hear that people say, okay, we will get fusion done and dusted in a few years, I am scratching my head, because that area is a very complicated area where we have to develop a technology so that with the availability of lithium that we can, without imagining unrealistic scenarios that we can then produce the amount of tritium that we will need to run these reactors. Complicated problem.
Yeah. Another complicated problem, but politically speaking, Gregor, that is happy to see you again, Gregor Rintalen, is asking how the cooperation with Russian Federation is going in the light of restrictive measures.
So, hello, Gregor. It's nice not to see you. I don't see you, but it was a pleasure to work with you a long time ago on another project, which thanks God it's completed. So the cooperation with Russia, it's a good question. You know, here in ITER, if you would come, you will see that there are about 100 staff from coming from Russian Federation, and you will not detect any say lack of cooperation, which is being say communicated from the geopolitical context. ITER has started as a project of peace, and from my perspective and from the one of our stakeholder, it should remain as such. So then, of course, there are some complexities that we have, because there are sanctions that have been implemented, and these sanctions are affecting our, say, way to work, because, for example, some components, they become complicated to transport. We have to ask permissions, derogations, and so on. So I cannot say that everything is the same. And but we try to do what our stakeholders are asking us, which is to work always together. And it is really a project where you see, the Americans working with the Chinese, which is also not, something, a sight that you see otherwise around the world very frequently.
Another question is linked to the fact that we always read in the newspaper enormous investment of the private sector. Is there any tension between the public money and private sector? Do you think that private sector by itself will be able to build something? Or it's only working together that we could finally manage the solution?
I think that we need to work together. I think that ITER, in some sense, has killed the competition. You know, we had all these members that were trying to cooperate, but also compete. And some competition is useful. We know when we go to school, we cooperate, but we also compete to some extent. And a little bit, the good thing is to balance this, how much we compete and cooperate at the same. Only competition is not good from my perspective. You know, we end up not helping each other. So that's the way we work, I believe, as humans. And ITER, being a form of cooperation by necessity, led to a number of years where competition was no longer there. And I think that this was not good in general. So now we have the private sector that by definition compete. They want to compete with everybody. They have to compete because that's how they get investment. And from my standpoint, the way we should behave in ITER and in other public institutions, try to support them. So now we don't always get, help in return, but it doesn't matter because we are publicly funded. We are paid by European citizens and from citizens from around the world. So I think it is part of our duty to give back to society what we can, even now. Now, not all private sectors are the same. Some are more grounded. Some are a little bit more optimistic than others. But we have established some knowledge transfer program. We have some specific workshop, one that happened in April here at ITER, where we invite the private sector, we respond to questions, we share experience, and the idea is that they get from ITER what they can and what they want. The relationship, from my standpoint, is overall proper. It's positive, but it's not always positive. There are some who are critical. Sometimes when I say what I told you today, some people in the private sector get upset because they say that I'm too pessimistic. But you know, I am a scientist, and more than anything else, and I don't feel I should be afraid of saying what I think is right in terms of creating the right level of expectations. So sometimes there is not always, appreciation, but okay, such is my job, and I think we have to live with it.
Yeah, and Nina, you're raising a question that is linked to the idea that ITER is too big. How flexible is ITER in possibly adapting or adopting a new technology solution which could eventually be developed meanwhile?
Yeah, so there is a question, and I have got a calculation, by the way, that I could elaborate. So if now I would just use the super duper technology that I have, would ITER look very different? And the answer is actually no, it wouldn't. Now, if I would take wild, optimistic assumptions on how it will work, then it could be different. But if I take the same criteria, it's when you build a component, you build it against a certain criteria of reliability and risk-taking. It would pretty much be the same. Now, when I show you the magnets, which are made of niobium-13, don't imagine that these are like old technology. It's really a state-of-the-art technology. Niobium-13 in ITER will operate at 12.5 Tesla. And but niobium-13 could operate at 18, 19, even 20 Tesla. So, and it was decided to operate at 12.5 because of problem of power flux. And think that in the coils, only about 4% of the coils is actually the superconductor. Most of it, it's steel, structural steel. So also there, we have to take conservative assumptions in terms of functioning. So it depends on the risk. So then there are new technologies that we decide to deploy because they are bringing to some cost-effective solutions. So this happens all the time. And the ideas and the technology, we need to embrace them. We need to embrace them when it's cost-effective, when it leads to some efficiency gain. So it's not so, I wouldn't say that we have today a technology, a new technology, which is a sort of a silver bullet, where now ITER, okay, let's do it again. And it would be different, cheaper, and could be built faster. I don't believe that. There are, nevertheless, I want to put some emphasis on this because we always look for new technology, as a solution of things. Engineering sometimes comes not by using new technology. Good engineering comes by using consolidated technology and try to use our imagination to do things simpler. Not, engineers like to do things always nice and new and and more clever and so on. This is not conclusive to cost efficiency. So it comes to very simple things, even just simple stainless steel, which is you take this TF magnet, TF magnet, each one weighs 400 tons. 400 tons, much of it is stainless steel. Okay, you think that stainless steel is costing all the same? It's not so, It is, you can buy it sometimes, finite product for 10 euro per kilogram. And when I show you some parts of the ITER TF coils, it would cost 1,000 euro per kilogram. So a factor of 100. And I think you will see this in your everyday life. You go and try to buy a stainless steel pot, and you will find that the difference in cost can be substantial. So it depends on the level of technology and that you want to employ. So I think the future of technologies need to look, the future of cost-effective implementation of this technology will have to look at the mix of the new ideas and also try to make all the ideas work at a cost-effective rate.
Another question that is really interesting is we see that in the politics to have more the attitude to wait to get the results of the fusion quite fast, and then is mentioned in order, for example, not to come back to nuclear fission or to refuse the Green Deal. So everyone seems to expect the solution of the fusion to be made in a few years. You have already clearly explained that is not the case. How do you see the relationship between fission and fusion? Because now everyone seems to realize that we need time in order to get fusion, so they are coming back to fission. And I know that the two branch of scientists that work on the two fields are a sort of mixed feeling, because those who are working in fission are perceived to be old-fashioned, dangerous, not really effective, while those who work on fusion are more in the dream of having the sun on the earth.
Yes, so, I think, I made myself hopefully clear, also before. Creating false expectations is not correct. And first, I don't think that it's correct to compare an established technology which has been engineered and that essentially is designed to work and produce power 24/7 with something which is an idea still to be proven. I think it's incorrect to compare two objects of the kind. So from my perspective, this is my personal opinion, nuclear power is an important, say, ingredient in the solution in general of energy. It's not the only solution. It needs energy in general, needs a multitude of energy sources, but nuclear power can provide some of the base load, and so it can help to contribute to the energy mix and make Europe, if we speak about Europe, more energy independent. We don't have, apart from the important problem of global warming, we also don't have across the board a lot of, we are not an energy rich, say, continent. And to make a long story short, when some politicians come and visit and they ask me this question, should we wait for fusion? I tell them, well, I don't recommend you to do that. My recommendation is that we invest in research, we invest in making fusion work, we invest in making nuclear fission safer and work, because there are many ways also to utilize that form of energy. And in the meantime, from my perspective, we need to say build more of what we know how to build. So this is my perspective, and the two technologies in the end, I think there will be a time will work hand in hand. They will. There are reasons why there are even synergies between the two. So I am not one fusion guy that said fusion is better, and I don't believe that people working in fusion are some sort of dinosaurs in the past. I don't think so. I think that there are just as many smart people working in nuclear fission as there are in nuclear fusion.
Yeah, and you know that we work in the GRTD, so the research dimension is quite important. So Nicola is asking, ITER is a technical engineering challenge, or is also something to be fed by the research?
It is the behavior of thermonuclear plasma, or the behavior of plasma, has still a lot of question mark. So who will say that we just know how the plasma behaves? Probably doesn't know. You know, it happens in science that there are people that think that they know when they don't. And actually, the more people know, the more they realize that they don't know. This is a common feature in those that engage in research and development. So there is a lot of research that will be executed in ITER, which will be not only in the technology, because there is a technology research, but also in the very principle of plasma physics. So it is not a solved problem, not at all. And it is particularly so when the technology, the physics, and the behavior of thermonuclear plasma is affecting some technological boundary. So when I speak before about power flux can be spread, but it will affect the performance of the plasma. And we can hope, and it's really an area of where the two problems of the physics of thermonuclear plasma and the technology of materials are touching each other. This is where we have a problem to solve. You know, we cannot imagine that we will develop an element that will melt at 20,000 centigrade. You know, not even AI will solve this problem. We just have some fundamental laws of physics, and the laws of physics cannot be legislated by the European Parliament. You know, they don't change. If they don't follow the Parliament, they don't follow anybody. So we have to face that. So there are unknowns. Now it's not an area of complete mystery. And so I believe that a lot will be learned by ITER, and a lot is being learned even today by improving our modeling ability. And one of the points I was writing in our objective is to accelerate the research phase in ITER. And to accelerate the research phase in ITER, we can prepare, we can develop now better models, so that then when we will operate ITER, we'll understand the behavior faster. We will be able to move faster in the research phase.
And another question concerning the EU institutions first, which is the interaction that you have as ITER with the fusion strategy of the Commission that has just been published and announced? And secondly, should the co-legislator not allow the budget that is foreseen on the financial perspective, can you still work, or what has been proposed is really the minimum is needed in order to pursue the project? Because in the Parliament, if you see on the discharge procedure for fusion for energy, there are concerns, they are challenging the amount, they are afraid even of the role of France. I mean, you are fully aware about it. So colleagues are asking, let's imagine that as any other post on the budget financial, they will be reduced. Is there something that you can afford?
So now on the input for the European strategy, we did not provide, we were not asked, I was not asked, to provide input. I provided some input, as I did with you, you know, about, you know, I've worked in this technology a long time, and I could share some views about ITER and about fusion in general. And I don't know if the European Commission has incorporated some of the inputs. I don't believe that the European Commission just ignored what I said, but we as an international organization, and myself as ITER Director General, I am not part of this process, and I shouldn't be. You know, I am part of the ITER project, so I don't complain. I think it's correct. And I have not even read this strategy paper. If you tell me that it has been published, it's news to me. I didn't know about that, and I will now immediately seek to read it with trepidation. But I don't know what's inside. Regarding your second question, I have to be careful here because I'm not aware, and I shouldn't be in the loop of these conversations, because they are really the responsibility of the Commission and the Director of Fusion for Energy. and I don't want to interfere with that. What I can say is that we are progressing now with a scheduled performance index of 105%, with a cost performance index of 1.1. It means that we are not using any of the contingency that we told the members we may need. We have not been given this contingency, by the way, we have not been given the money, but so we are not using the money we have not been given, but nevertheless, we will not need. I think that we are progressing with a very good cost performance. So we, on that front, I don't believe that the European Commission or the European Parliament should be upset, at least with the ITER organization. And if they are, I will try to explain the data. If at the end, because of priorities that the European Parliament and the member state will lead to a reduction of the annual budget, it's not a matter for me to say whether I can afford. It will, it depends on how much it is, you know. It may either increase the risk that we will stumble, or it will delay just outright the project. So normally when a project is delayed, it costs more. But it's very important to know, you know, because in a project, you cannot find out, okay, we don't have the money now, and you find yourself in a situation where you have to demobilize some contractors. This is very bad, you know. But if we know in advance, you know, we will provide a scenario to the members. It's not just the European Commission, there are also 6 other member states. So for me, the message I give to the members is, okay, now we are going at full speed. Some of them did not expect, you know, they thought, oh, okay, they tell us that they go at full speed, that they will burn so much gasoline per day, they will never be able to achieve that, okay? And now they find, now these guys are going really at full speed, so we need the gasoline, and it doesn't surprise me that some say, oh, okay, now we have a problem to give you the gasoline, okay? Then in this case, we will adapt our speed, and if they want us to go fast and not use the money, then I think they will have to find somebody else that can solve this problem, because I may not be in a position to do it. But it's their choice. It's their choice. It's at the end to establish priorities amongst the many that the Europeans and other members have.
I have a very good news to you, because as Claudia has mentioned, I was too positive that the strategy has not yet published. So the Commission has still the time to take into account your input. It's something sometimes surprising, because as you have seen, I'm pushing a lot the Commission to be present at Fusion for Energy, to be in contact with them. So I think that all actors on this very challenging file must really work closely together. And I think that is important that everyone can provide a contribution. I mean, from as an outsider, I cannot imagine the Commission publishing a strategy in fusion without taking into account what is going on in ITER, because it's true that you are international, but still we are paying half of the budget. So we are asking taxpayers to spend $1 billion on this respect. So I think that it's important that everyone will work together. So the good news is that it's still time to work together. I think that we come to the end of the very challenging and important. And Pietro, I'm discovering you not as a very good scientist, but also a very good communicator, explaining clearly and easily things that are not that easy. Their tendency seems to be quite mixed. I see people very knowledgeable with long experience in the field, and newcomers that just discover fusion, reading the newspaper, and are happy to understand better what is going on. You see on the left side of the screen, people thanking you for your intervention. If I got, after the meeting, specific question that we were not able to deal with, I will dare to send to you in order to publish on our...
You can send me the questions. I would be interested, and any question is a good question for me. I am not sure I will have the time to respond to all the good questions. I see one here. Isn't ITER creating false expectation regarding the promise of nuclear fusion? I like that question. You are, I think, right to ask it, and I will adjust my presentation to create, even a lesser expectation in the next. It's true. A fusion power plant is like to be more complex than ITER. So we will have to find ways to simplify ITER so that at the end this technology can have a chance. But it is a very, very good point. And if you see in the website some troubling claims, please let me know, and I will do my best to correct. When I joined ITER and I looked the first time on the ITER website, the first image that there was unlimited energy. And I had to convince my team members that nothing is unlimited in nature and that this was not creating the right expectation. So we are attuning our messages. I am not very popular sometimes when I do so, but I will try to do my best to provide the correct image. So thank you for this question, which I really loved, and I will appreciate any feedback and more questions, and I will do my best to respond to you. Thank you for your invitation. It was for me a pleasure.
But don't be too far on a less optimistic approach, because I just got a message from my colleague mentioning, dear Cristiano, I'm more or less your age. Listening, Pietro, I realized that we are not going to witness when fusion will be operational. So
yeah,
let's have the hope that we will live enough to see.
We all hope, but we do a lot of things in our life that will be conclusive to something that we'll never witness. So I think that although it's not ideal, we do what we can. So you are correct, but the hope is not stopping. So thank you so much, Cristiano, for your invitation. And thank you for listening to my long presentation. You have a good
Thank you very much, Pietro. Get in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I mean, all the questions will be recorded, and I will push Pietro to provide answers, and I'm sure that we will manage. And all question and answer will be published on our website. With ICRA, we will work in order to have this recording published on our YouTube channel, and we will share with all of you the link, and you can then share with other colleagues that will be eventually interested. Thank you very much. Get in touch for the new conferences. And if you have any suggestion for any other conference that we could organize, please be free to suggest. Bye-bye.